Having grown up in the church, I think it was a regular thing that I heard about. But I guess the first time it kind of struck me was when I was young, elementary school. I don't remember when. I think the idea of someone dying for me it was sad. It was a sad thing, and I cried hearing about that, but I don't think I really understood the depth of it, since I don't think I understood my sin at that time.
The earliest time that I remember actually thinking about the cross was when I was in elementary school, and I was in the children's ministry at our church in Indianapolis, where I grew up. And it was a Sunday, and our leader was getting us ready for Easter weekend, and of course before Easter is Good Friday. And I remember asking our leader why it's called Good Friday. She went on to explain to me what happened on the cross, and I think that I had heard the story before, but that was one of those times where it really made me think about what the cross actually meant. And so I think I was about in second or third grade at that point.
When I was like 7 or 8, when my mom and my dad, they sat us down for some reason that day, and they told us that the world is coming to an end soon and that we have to believe in Christ and what he did. And so I remember it really scaring me, and and that's why I decided to accept Christ into my heart that night when I was really young. And I remember just crying and being scared of going to hell. So that's when I first heard about the cross.
We're learning about Abraham being called to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah, and the speaker who had come to share with us about that made that connection for us, and showed how what God actually stopped Abraham from doing, there was no one to stop God from doing with his own son. And just the heartache that must have meant for God, the obedience that implied for Jesus, it really struck me. The speaker called that radical faith, radical love, and radical devotion. And that was the first time I felt that God was calling me to something beyond just whatever the world had for me. And that call, it would come back every now and then. The cross would reappear every now and then in my heart as I was just going through my adolescence. But it wasn't until, I think, college that it really became something much more concrete for me. It was more than a call. It stood in front of me and demanded my full surrender. And that's when, by God's grace, I was willing to at least begin.
I think gradually it began to dawn on me more and more that I am a much more of a sinner than I thought I was. And so because I grew up in a Christian home, I grew up as a PK too, as a pastor's kid, and so I was always kind of trained to be a good kid. I never really rebelled or did anything crazy. And so I always considered myself a decent person. As the years go by, I can really say that I am a sinner, and I think every year I mean it more. And so the more I realize what a sinner I am, I think the more significant the cross becomes to me. Yeah, the gospel just becomes more beautiful to me every year and more meaningful to me every year.
I think it was at another retreat later on at 6th grade, and I think by that time I was growing in an understanding of my sin as I was struggling with, I guess, my flaws. And at that time it became more real in the sense that I came to see God as not someone distant, but someone who was willing and able to help me, able to transform me.
Yeah, every day I'm reminded of it when I wake up, and I have to wake up because William is crying. I mean, it's such a small sacrifice compared to the cross, but I have to remember to bear the cross of waking up earlier than I'm used to and earlier than I want to. And I don't know, it's such a small thing, but for me it's like a big thing because I'm that lazy and I'm that incapable of waking up early. And so just like having to get him like every morning when he wakes up, yeah, it's like a small sacrifice that I have had to make since he was born. The idea of sacrifice, that always comes to mind for me. Yeah, whenever I think about Christ and his sacrifice, it just makes it a little bit more real, I guess. Again, it's such a small thing, but that's practically speaking, how I am reminded of the cross every day.
I mean, I think there are the more straightforward ways, such as reading the Bible, prayer, and meditation. But I think the more unexpected ways are in marriage. I think the example of my wife as she loves me and serves me, but also in confronted through marriage how I still fall short of the example of Christ. Not in a discouraging way, but in a humbling way, in a way that makes me confront and accept my limitations, but also urges me to ask in hope.
As much as it is my responsibility to remind myself of the cross, I find that the Lord does that for me quite faithfully. And He does that every time we look at other people, and every time we hear what's going on in the world around us, every time we look at our own sin. We're reminded of the cross in all of these different ways. The cross that represents our forgiveness of sin. The cross that represents our call to love and serve others. Quite frankly, I don't know that we can go through a whole day without being reminded of the cross somehow. And so even without particularly trying, I found that the Lord is quite good at reminding me of my call, and reminding me of the promise that He's made to me.